Welcome back to episode 3 of our second season of Due Diligence. So I have to ask you, are you ready for Christmas?
I'm getting there.
You're getting there?
If you pay attention to our porch in the next few days, there's probably going to be a package every day. And that's okay.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
That's okay. It's just life right now. It's
I'm
okay.
slowly getting there.
Okay.
Slowly.
Yeah.
All right. So in our last episode, we talked about being prepared for the various seasons of life, at least as prepared as we can be. And we discussed the importance of observation or paying attention to those who are older than us, who are facing transitions in the home. We talked about the importance of anticipation and actually thinking about the various seasons of life that we will possibly face. And then we talked about the importance of communication with your spouse and even to your kids. And we asked a very important question. What are you doing right now, today, in your home, to prepare for what you might face tomorrow? And we stress the importance of being able to smile at the future. In this episode, we want to talk about marriage. If you're married, then more than likely you said some sort of vows in your wedding to your spouse, and you made your spouse some very important promises. And if you said traditional wedding vows, then more than likely you promised to love, honor, and cherish your spouse. You promised to be there for your spouse in every season of life, and you promised to do so from this day forward. So let me ask you a question. How are you doing with that? How are you doing with the promises that you made to your spouse on your wedding day? And so that leads us to what we want to talk about first. And that's, as we were preparing for this episode, we talked about how that when you are dating the person that you have decided to marry, how you have all of the time in the world for that person. You sacrifice, you give up time with others for them. You sometimes do some very crazy things because you have all of this time. And so what does that make you think about when we're talking about that?
I mean, I think about all the fun that we had during that time.
Okay.
And all of the different things that we did, we went different places, we went on different dates, all of those things. I think about all of that. There's a lot of things that I think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about our phone bill debacle. Do you remember that?
Yes.
So Mallory and I love to talk. And this is back in the time when cell phones in everybody's hands were a new thing, when they still charged to send a text message. And you paid for each individual text message. And you also had like a set amount of minutes you could use in the daytime. But between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m., that was like time where you could talk to anybody at any time. It's unlimited. Yes, absolutely. And so in that time frame, they also had this thing called rollover minutes. And if you didn't use all of your minutes in the daytime for that month, they would roll over to the next month.
Sorry to correct you. That was only AT&T, correct?
That's correct. I had Verizon, you had AT&T.
Yes, AT&T had rollover.
Absolutely. And so I remember we were talking a lot, and I even asked you, I said, are we talking too much? Like, our phone bills are going to be massive. And Mallory responds, and I'm not even joking, she says, that's okay, we've got rollover minutes.
And we did. We had rollover minutes. We had.
Keyword is had.
Hundreds of rollover minutes.
Well, I get the next phone bill from Verizon, from my phone, and it was over $1,200. And she's not expecting anything until one day her dad calls and says, hey, what's this $800+ phone bill that I've got? And why do I have it? And then the very next month, I think mine was over $1,000 and hers was like $600, something like that. We liked to talk when we were dating. And we still like to talk. Obviously, we're now we're doing it on tape.
Are we done? Okay, go ahead.
All right.
Keep
So
going.
we, so we had a lot of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we love to spend that time. We love to be together. And when we weren't together, we wish that we were together.
Mm-hmm.
So the question that we have to ask ourselves, and that I think is important for our listeners and for those watching, is what's happened since that time that you were dating? I'm sure that we all have stories that we could tell about the things that we did when we were dating together. And then all of a sudden we get married, we make these vows, and we promise that from this day forward, I'm going to do this. From this day forward, I'm going to do that. And so we've got to ask, how is that going for you right now? I think that's really important to think about. In Genesis 2 and verse 24, God said, "For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." And we often say that we have to leave and cleave, and we get that from this verse right here. And we have to leave, and that idea is you leave, if you have to leave your parents, you leave any relationship that's on earth that you have for your spouse, that your spouse becomes number one, right, that they become your very best friend. And so you cleave to them, you cling to them, you adhere to them, you constantly are in the process of getting to know each other. It's about being one. It's about unity in the marriage. It is about being each other's very best friend. And I think that's really important. What comes to your mind when I say all of that?
I think that, I think that maybe when people are making those vows, right, do we almost kind of look at the vows like big picture? Mm-hmm. Like these vows are that big umbrella that we're saying that, yes, absolutely, I'm going to be with this person through thick and thin, good and bad, big picture, right? And then what about that day to day to day?
Yeah. What about when they're doing really, or what about when they are having a hard time today? Mm-hmm. And that hard time is, getting on my nerves.
Right. Or even if it's a great day and they're not getting on my nerves, it's a great day, but we're just, doing our own thing and just kind of going through the motions almost, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's another question I think we need to ask. What can we do, practically speaking, to make our spouse a priority in the home? Mm-hmm. When I ask that, what do you think about?
Well, I first think about that as much as we love our children, that children just often get in the way of that. Okay. And I don't mean that ugly. I don't mean to sound like that they're in the way like that. I mean, I love them dearly, but often, there's so much of their needs that have to be met that it almost becomes this thing of their needs are being met first. And that means that I have to be even more intentional about what I'm doing to show you the love and the affection and everything that you need and that I'm supposed to show. I have to show you all these things and be intentional. And it goes from small things to big things. I mean, a small thing for me is just, I'm working as a school teacher. And so a small thing for me is that when I have my lunch break, I know it doesn't happen every time, but I try really hard to make sure I grab my phone and make sure that I send a text. It's either in the lunch break or it's during the planning period. It's just something as small as that, where it's just that little check-in during the day. Yeah,
and so I think the obvious thing here is communication. We have to communicate. And so, send text messages, talk on the phone, have face-to-face, non-interrupted conversations about important things and about things that are not as important, but are fun to talk about. If you have kids, and I tell guys this all the time, especially with the couples that we talk to, if there's a situation where maybe there is a communication barrier or maybe there's a problem of just not communicating, and you've said this too, when we get home or when we come home as adults, one of us has been with the kids a little longer than the other. And a lot of times, you know, one child is not doing what he's supposed to be doing, needs to be disciplined, and you have just had it. And I mean, you're up here with that child and you're ready to discipline that child. And then dad comes home and dad's home. And it's just this huge thing where he's the hero. And then there's resentment, or there's the potential or the temptation for resentment, because dad's sitting here and he's wrestling with the kid, he's playing with the kid, he's loving on the kid that I'm up to here with, and we're not on the same page. And so I think the important thing there is call your spouse on your way home. Find out, how has the day gone? I think that is a huge aspect of this. And I think that's important. Don't check out when you get home. And guys, I have to say this, we are the world's worst at this. When we get home, we've worked a long and a hard day, and we want to go home and just relax on the couch and watch ESPN or Fox News or whatever it is that we like to watch. And at the end of the day, there are some things that probably need to be done. And if there's nothing that needs to be done, there's probably needs that your spouse has that needs to be met. And so I think the idea of not checking out when you get home, I think that's a really important thing. And I think that's important. You know, I've got down here, go on a regularly scheduled date night.
I recommend to people now, because I know for us, and maybe there are people out there listening that are great at scheduling just regular dinner dates and things like that. And if they are out there, I applaud you greatly. But I recommend to people now, buy the tickets, right? For us,
yes,
it means we have to buy the tickets.
Yes.
And do I want to necessarily sometimes spend that money on the tickets? Well, probably I actually do, but buy the tickets, because if I buy the tickets, then that means, well, guess what? For the planner and me, it's on the calendar. And if I'm just depending on scheduling dinner, dinner's not always going to happen. And so I think you, like you said, work towards planning those things regularly, but also whenever I send you a message like, hey, so-and-so's coming to town, or there's this concert, you're my first thought of who I want to go with, right? And so just that little gesture tells you right there, like, she's thinking about me, like she wants to go with me and she wants us to do this together and she wants to have that date night.
Yeah, it's a very subtle thing when you do that. It's not just about going on the date.
Right.
It's about, okay, she's thinking about this when we go. And as she said, and that's really important. I think that's really important. So go on a regularly scheduled date night and plan the dates ahead of time. And I think that's important. And guys, you need to take part in that too. We all have things that we like to do with the guys. We all have things that we like to do, or, well, you have things you like, I'm married.
I have things I like to do with the girls.
You have
you
things
do it with the guys.
Yeah, absolutely. But what about things that we enjoy doing together? So when we did our premarital counseling, before we ever got married, one of the pieces of advice that we were given is that we need to find something we enjoy doing together, and we need to do that together. And so in the last episode or 2 episodes ago, you mentioned playing golf, you mentioned hunting, and you said those were male things. First of all, I disagree. Well, I think females can do those things.
I said male dominated.
Okay,
right?
That's true.
Male dominated.
That's true. That's fair.
Yes.
That's fair. But those are, guys can cook. They can go to cooking things and things like that.
Sure.
We like movies that are not shoot 'em up, action packed sometimes, and we can go to those. And so there are just a number of things like that we can do, to be closer together. We can take a mini vacation once a year. And somebody gave us that advice. We had actually been married, and we were in Kentucky somewhere, and somebody actually gave us advice that they and their spouse went on a mini vacation every year, and it was just a couple of nights just to get away, where the kids are with grandparents, and we're going to go and just kind of recharge. And I think that has been very helpful.
There's been a lot of this, I think, circling on social media and reels where people say things like every 2 weeks you go out for dinner, every 2 months you go for a night away, every 2 years you go for a weekend or a week. There's a lot of different ideas of maybe how to do those things that are circling out there. But I definitely think that that's true, that you need to plan time away, for sure, whether it's a night or more.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we think about like intimacy, one of the things that we don't talk about enough is spiritual intimacy and being one as we strive to serve God. And so I do think studying our Bibles together, or talking about the Bible together, talking about a sermon we heard or an article we read or some spiritual thought that's there. And this one probably hits me the hardest because I'm horrible at it, and you know that. But I think praying together as a couple for our family, for our relationship, for things like that. I think of the times when I haven't been my best in the relationship. And I think those are the times when my prayer life has not been the greatest. And I think that a lot of people can identify with that. And so making time for that, and also planning together, and like making your goals my goals and my goals your goals. I think that's really important as we look at this and as we talk about that. And I think that the key to any strong marriage, again, is found in this idea of unity and this idea of togetherness. It's clinging to each other. It's adhering to each other. It's not just a one-time I do. It is an everyday lifestyle. You are married every day to your spouse. You are the parents of your children every single day. We know that. But you're married every day to your spouse. The kids are going to leave the house at some point. You're going to be with your spouse till death do you part. And so there are some things we've got to do together. Anything else on that you would add?
I mean, I think too that even, in these years where maybe things are more challenging, like when you were saying, find things that you would like to do together. I mean, I like, you reference golf. I like to play golf.
You're very good at it.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Just for the record, she's very good at golf.
Thank you. I would be better if I had more time to play, but like that's something that I look forward to that we can do later on when there maybe is a little more time and things like that to do that regularly. But I think too that I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong either with, first off, maybe kind of including kids with that. I mean, I love to play board games. Well, not every game can you and I sit down and play together, but that also, feeds into me whenever we are sitting and doing that with the kids as well. And things like that too. So I think that there maybe are some times too where you have to just kind of look at it and go, okay, the kids are with us, but also like this is feeding into each other as well. Yeah. I think it's that balance of doing things with them, but also being intentional to be doing things without them too.
I agree. I like that. Those are some good thoughts. Finally, what impact? What are the benefits of prioritizing your spouse like we're talking about? Like, I think sometimes we forget that there's a reward to doing things with diligence in our home. And so what is the reward? And I think that's important to talk about. When I ask that question, what do you think about?
Well, I mean, ultimately, this is part of the role that Scripture tells me that I'm supposed to fulfill. When I chose to marry you, I took on this role of being your wife. And so therefore, this is just another role that I have to fulfill also, within my spiritual life and everything. But also I think too, when you're thinking about what is the reward, often you and I have sat with couples who are getting ready to get married. And we will often ask them the question of, what are the things that you have seen in your parents' marriage that you would like to emulate in your own? And every time I'm pretty certain we've left that. And every time we go, what are our kids going to say about us?
Absolutely.
And it's a little bit scary to think about, right? But also, I mean...
But we want somebody to ask our kids that question.
Absolutely. I most definitely want my children to be asked that someday because I want them to have that reflective piece where they're looking at it.
Yeah.
But also I think that should be part of the reward, right? If you and I are doing what we're supposed to be doing in our marriage, and we're being that good example. Is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not.
Never.
But if we are being that example to our children, all we're doing is encouraging our children to find that as well.
Absolutely.
And if they do find it, and they might not, but if they do find it, then they're going to be better prepared to also have that same relationship in their life. And then, well, what are we hopefully, then do? I mean, that's just...
Yeah. So wear the shoes you want your children to fill. Be that example for your children. I think that is a huge impact. I didn't think about that. When I was thinking about this particular question about the benefits, I couldn't help but think that, for most marriages, before kids enter in the equation, and for most married couples who are having issues, especially some of the ones we've talked to, you have them living 3 different lives. He's living his life, she's living her life, and then occasionally they're living their life. Mm-hmm. And then if you have children, you're living your life, she's living her life, and then you're living your children's lives sometimes mm-hmm. because you're dealing with those things. And then occasionally you're living your life together. And so what happens is we compartmentalize everything. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a huge challenge. And so when we get married, when we make these promises, when we're being diligent in fulfilling each other's needs, we remember what Solomon said in Ecclesiastes chapter 4 in verse 9 and following. He says, 2 are better than one, because they have a good return for their labor. For if either of them falls, the one will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there is not another to lift him up. Furthermore, if 2 lie down together, they keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? And if one can overpower him as alone, 2 can resist him. And so here's the point. And I think this is important for us. It's important for everybody. You need your spouse. Mm-hmm. And it needs to be one life, mm-hmm. not separate lives. You need your spouse as a part of your life for every aspect of your life, mm-hmm. and your spouse needs you too. And there are needs that the 2 of you have that only the 2 of you can meet. Right. And I'm not just speaking of intimate needs either. I'm talking about emotional needs and other things that come with that. And so what are your final thoughts?
I mean, my final thoughts are that I feel like that there is so much more that we could talk about.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Because there's so many different areas, mm-hmm. And everything. But I think again, just to maybe put it in one thought, and one final thought is just making sure that you're being intentional.
Absolutely.
Or if you want to say diligent. Did
you just use the word?
I did.
You weren't going to use the word. Okay.
I did. Both the same concept, same idea. You have to really work hard to be intentional because you married this person because you love them.
Absolutely.
Hopefully you still do love them. And so you still have to work at it. It's not going to come easy. Yeah. You have to work and put in that work and that effort.
Absolutely. As I was thinking about my final thoughts tonight, I couldn't help but think about Genesis 2 and verse 18. The purpose for the marriage relationship that God saw when he created Adam and gave Adam duties in the Garden of Eden to fulfill. He said it was not good for man to be alone. And so God made Adam a helper suitable for him. And they were told to leave and cleave. In other words, God noticed that Adam needed companionship, and God provided the solution for Adam. He provided Adam with a wife, and they would meet each other's needs. And so, if you are listening to us, if you're watching us, here's what I want you to focus on. Don't focus on your spouse's imperfections. You might be tempted to hear this and to think, well, I have this need and my spouse is not meeting this need, or here's some great suggestions and we're not doing that because my spouse is not doing this. Don't focus on the needs that you have that you feel are currently being neglected at this moment, okay? I'm not saying there's never a time for you to focus on those and to think about those, but don't do it right now. For just a moment, I want you to focus on the needs of your spouse. I want you to focus on understanding those needs. You may need to have a discussion with them. Focus on meeting those needs, which is a day-to-day process. And from this day forward, be diligent in your efforts to be unified and together with your spouse. Listen, focusing on what I can do to help them is the best way for me to have a happy and fulfilling marriage. And when both the husband and the wife do that, you will be fulfilled. But it takes diligence. It takes understanding, and that means that communication has to be there. Thank you so much for joining us. And don't forget to join us for the next episode of Due Diligence.
Don't forget to subscribe on all major platforms and visit our website at due diligencepodcast.com.